back to my Astroimaging journey channel. Today I want to do a Q&A. I have a nice little question from a subscriber. Alright, so the first thing we're going to be doing today is answering a viewer question. So our first question comes from, and the only question for this video by the way, comes from Raddatster. I hope I pronounced that correctly. If not, I apologize. This viewer asks, I basically have the same gear, 1100 HD on a CGM 2 Orion 60mm guide scope, but using the Orion Starshoot 3G as a guide camera. Running a Canon T7i unmodified to start. Looking over your videos, your tracking looks far beyond what I have been able to achieve in PhD. I have seen some recommendations that for the focal length we are running, we should be using OAG. I'm assuming you mean off-axis guider. Just wondering what your opinion is, and you have any additional pointers for getting the guiding up to par. Currently I'm throwing away about 50% of my lights on 120-second exposures due to poor guiding and star trails. Thanks for posting these videos. I have watched your full series and found it very useful. Okay, so first, thank you for the kind words. I'm glad I can help somebody out there. First, let's look at your setup. You basically have the same setup as me with the exception of the guide camera. I'm using the Orion Starshoot. You're using the Orion Starshoot. I'm not sure which version you're using, the 3G, so I'm not sure if there's any differences between the two. So first off, as I said in my introduction video, I'm a network engineer by trade. The first thing we always say, always go to layer 1 first. What is layer 1? That's physical. So what can we look at that's physical that would cause these problems? First thing that comes to mind, double check your level. Make sure the level on that your mount is in the middle of that circle. If it's not level, that's the first thing that's going to throw everything off as far as tracking. You're going to have periods where you're going to have good tracking because it's not so susceptible to the leveling, and then you're going to have other areas of the sky where it will be more pronounced. So that would be the first thing I would check. Make sure that thing is as spot on level as you can get. Double check it every night. If you leave your scope out like I do for several nights, if there's several clear nights, and just cover it up, double check that level every night. You don't know if maybe it sunk a little bit and threw it off. There could be a whole host of reasons why, but anyways, that would be the first thing I would check. Second thing I would check would be make sure PhD has the right settings for those cameras. Go on the Orion's website and download the pixel size. Make sure your focal length is set in there correctly. There's several different parameters that if they're off by even 0.001, it can throw off the tracking. So that's the first two things. Check that level. Make sure your settings for your equipment is good. The next thing I would do, and this is a recommendation that I haven't thoroughly tested myself one day, I'm really hoping to, just because I like to do things like that, is get your guide scope, that 60mm guide scope, as perfect as you can as far as focus, and then back it off a hair. I've read that what happens is it rounds out the stars a little bit better, smooths out the scene conditions, and that helps the guide software, PhD, find a better center for the star, and that will help you also then guide properly. That's what I did from the get-go, and once it's locked down, as long as it doesn't get any major jarring, I've only had to refocus that thing once. So that's the next thing I would recommend. If any of this you have already attempted, apologize if I'm rehashing old things. Again, these videos are for the people that are looking to get into it, and they may not have tried these things, and hopefully it helps them out as well. So, Mr. Rad, assuming you're a Mr., apologize if you've already done some of this. I hope you understand. The next thing, OAG. I'm assuming that you're using that acronym to be an off-axis guider as opposed to an on-axis guider. For our focal length, we need to have an on-axis guided scope, meaning the camera is in the same plane as the scope is pointed. The off-axis guider, the one where you do the little T connection where the guide camera sits on the top or wherever you orient it, and your imaging camera sits in the back and is in line with the scope. That takes just a real small sample of that viewable image to look for a guide star. And the problem with that is, at this focal length, the longer focal lengths, I believe the rough estimate was somewhere around 12 to 1500 or higher, 12 to 1500 millimeter, that is, or higher. It's just not good to use an off-axis guider, simply because the sample size is too small. There's not enough stars to be able to guide on. So you want to have a separate on-axis guide scope that will give you a broader view of the night sky, so that you can capture more of those brighter stars in order to guide with. You don't want to select the brightest star, and you don't want to select the dimmest star. Personally, I let PhD select the star, and I haven't had any real problems with it thus far, at least with the guiding in relation to that. So that would be my next recommendation, is make sure you are in fact using that guide scope. Again, just a slight bit out of focus, and you should be good to go as far as an equipment standpoint is concerned. Excuse me. So now we get into the little things that are, setup dependent and based on how you want to do things. Now me, I use the QHY Polemaster. Love that thing. I rarely have to do any type of drift alignment to do the 1 minute and 2 minute exposure images that I've been doing lately. That's 60 seconds, 120 seconds for those that prefer that. With that, I highly recommend you invest in that, simply because it cut my alignment time down from 45 minutes, some days longer, down to basically 15 minutes or less. For those that are using it, make sure that you're getting as close to the center as possible on that star. I've read that that's very key. Again, that's another thing I'll want to test out eventually. But I've read that you want to make sure that you use a mouse or a stylus if you have a touchscreen, and not the trackpad, mouse pad, touchpad, whatever you want to call it, so that you can really get as close to the center of that star that you're selecting, specifically Polaris, and then your tracking stars, so that you can, so that the software can better determine the position of the stars, excuse me, and ultimately where the polar alignment should be. And then that is where I spend the bulk of that 15 minutes or so, is, the first couple minutes, if you've seen a couple of the other videos where I've gone through using the Polemaster, it's only a short few minutes to select the star, turn it 30 degrees, select the stars, turn it 30, and get to the point where now you got to do all your azimuth and your RA and deck adjustments. Or actually, it's not RA and deck, it's elevation and azimuth. Excuse me. So to that end, that is where you want to spend the bulk of your time. I will literally sit there and go back and forth until I get that to where the crosshairs, you've got the green crosshair and the red crosshair, and they overlap, and then you'll see the red crosshair kind of flicker from behind it, kind of like that. I will get it to where that flicker is as minimized as I possibly can get it with the coarse adjustments that the CGEM 2 offers. I'd really love to change those out, and with something that you can fine tune a little bit more, but unfortunately I haven't seen anything aftermarket that I really want to invest in right now. So that's where the bulk of that 15 minutes, I will spend a good 10 minutes just trying to get that as tweaked as close as possible. And then depending on what the imaging session is, I may go over towards the meridian, pick a star, using any of those mobile apps. SkyMap, I believe is one of them. I can't think of the other one I've used, where you just basically point your phone up at the sky, after you calibrate it and do all those funky things with your phone, point it up at the sky, find yourself a nice bright star out there, select it. Okay, so that's Arcturus, let's say. After we're all ready here, and you do the go-to, boom, go over there, and then do the drift alignment off of one of those stars. I only select that simply because then I can go and also double check the focus on the on the SCT. I can also double check my culmination if I feel I need to, things of that nature. You're going to want to guide off of something other than the bright star of Arcturus, simply because it's too big, too bright, and PhD is going to, I tried it once and that drift alignment was just all over the place, and trying to dial it in just did not work for me. Selecting a dimmer star seemed to yield better results in the calculation from PhD and allow me to dial it in a little bit better. But if you have the PoleMaster, great. Do that, go over, do your drift alignment near the meridian, and then you should be pretty well good to go. If you don't have the PoleMaster or something similar, then I recommend doing a polar drift alignment through PhD, and then another drift alignment over by the meridian. It'll take you some more time, but you should be able to dial it in pretty good using that method again, but it's going to take you a lot more time. Beyond that, I really can't think of anything other than just making sure that the system's working. Question I would have for you is, do you have dew heaters on there? You get a little bit of dew on there. It can throw off the way the star's seen in the scope and by the camera, and that can affect guiding as well. The other thing I would caution you on, or I don't know if that's the right word, flats. Take your flats in PhD, build your flat library, and build it often. I personally like to do it about once a month, simply because pixels die. You never know when they're going to die. And if you have a hot pixel, die as in it went on, PhD could consider that as a star and try to track on it. Next thing you know, it's doing its own thing. So do your flats, make sure it's finding out where those hot pixels are, where those dead pixels are, so it can better calculate the image it's seeing when it needs to stack it to do the tracking. The only other thing at that point is depends on what software you're using to image. Okay, I am using Sequence Generator Pro. to do my image captures. And in there, it obviously, for those of you that know, connects to the PhD server and on the local host or the computer, and will interact with it as it sees fit. So this is the other thing that's key. When I'm setting up for the night, first thing I want to do is I want to slew to some star in the region where I'm going to be imaging. Might even slew over to that area of the sky that I'm going to be at anyways. Let's say I'm 51. Okay? And then I want to manually select a star, not too bright, not too dim. And then I'm going to calibrate, run the calibration sequence. Okay? And then I'm going to pull up the calibration after it starts guiding. Once it's completely done, I measure the backlash. I do all that good stuff. All right? And then I pull up the calibration data and I make sure that you see that nice perpendicular 90-degree angle between your RA and your deck. If it's like this, like this, that's not good. Okay, you're going to have tracking problems. You want it to be perpendicular. Doesn't matter if it's this way, doesn't matter if it's that way or that way. As long as it is a perpendicular 90-degree angle, that is what you want. Okay, so double check that information as well. Again, taking the time, taking an hour. Normally I'm ready to go within 20 minutes. I've heard other people, they're ready to go in a couple minutes because they're on a pedestal and or a pillar and they got all that good stuff. Kudos to them. But I usually am ready to go within 20 minutes. Sometimes 30 minutes, depending. Depends on how the sky is, and but if I need to spend an hour, I'll spend an hour, because if I have to throw away 50% of the subs, like this viewer is, if you get a good 6-hour night, 6-hour imaging, 6 hours worth of imaging, and you got to throw away 50% or 3 hours of that, spending an hour early on to get you that extra 2 to 3 hours worth of imaging time, definitely worth it. So put in the time when you're setting up, when you're fresh, and that's all I can think of. I'm sorry if anything I've said you've already tried and I'm just preaching to the choir. But if anything that you haven't tried works for you, great. I hope and pray that you get it set up right and tracking properly. Personally, I love reading that you think my tracking was pretty good. Personally, I thought it was pretty bad. I thought it could be even closer. But that comes with experience. It comes with trial and error. Hopefully I helped you out, and now I'm going to get on to my next video. Thank you. And clear skies, by the way.